Hi, I'm Jamie Poisson. Towards the end of the week, the worrying escalations from two nuclear powers, India and Pakistan, continued to roil. There were reports Thursday of heavy shelling overnight from both sides. That followed a day of violence on Wednesday after India launched a series of airstrikes into Pakistan and Pakistan-run Kashmir. Dozens of people were killed. The eruption of violence has all been in response to a militant attack in April in Pahalgam, a hillside town in India-run Kashmir that killed at least 26 people, mostly Indian tourists. India has accused Pakistan of being behind it. Kashmir is one of the most contested pieces of land in the world. India and Pakistan have made historical claims to it and fought wars over it before. There is a real worry here that the latest round of violence could be the start of another one. So today I'm talking to the CBC's South Asia Bureau Chief, Selma Shivji, out of Mumbai to understand how we got here. Selma, hey, it's good to have you.
My pleasure to be here.
So this all started because of a militant attack in Pahalgam, right? A town in India-administered Kashmir on April 22nd. And this is an attack that the Indian government blames on Pakistan, and Pakistan denies. And can you just take me through what happened?
Yeah, so it was a pretty major militant attack, the deadliest attack against civilians in more than 2 decades in Indian-controlled Kashmir. Obviously, that's a contested area which is used to violence, but still, this attack took many Indian security officials by surprise. Several militant gunmen targeted a group of tourists, and it was really the chilling details of the attacks that we heard from survivors that shocked and angered so many people in India when they heard those details. And the survivors were widows of the victims, right? Explaining that the attackers singled out Hindu men and shot them at really close range, often in the head. 26 men were killed. So those details, I think, really resonated and shocked a lot of people in the country.
I understand Pakistan called for a neutral investigation into what happened, and just what is happening with that right now?
Well, there's nothing really happening with the neutral investigation. It was floated by Pakistan in the midst of their strong denials of involvement, because basically what happened was the Indian police immediately identified 3 gunmen. They released sketches. They claimed 2 of those gunmen were Pakistani nationals. There was a massive manhunt underway. The gunmen have not been caught yet. And India, since the attack, which is more than 2 weeks ago now, has consistently blamed Pakistan for it, right? Saying that New Delhi believes Pakistan has linkages to the shooting, which India calls a terrorist massacre.
India's spirit will never be broken by terrorism.
And Pakistan denied it was involved, and repeatedly denied it was involved in any way in the attack.
Our eastern neighbor continues a pattern of exploitation, leveling baseless allegations.
And then called for this neutral investigation to see who was behind it. Now, India believes that, Pakistan was backing the militants. And just in the larger context, New Delhi has long said that Pakistan fuels terrorism and insurgency in the area, really supporting attacks to destabilize the region. That's a pretty common refrain that we get from New Delhi, and one, of course, that Islamabad denies repeatedly.
Okay, and just the attack in Pahalgam, it has sparked just a range of emotion in India, right? And just tell me more about how charged the discourse is around the militant attack, both from Indian politicians, but also in Indian news media and people that you've talked to.
Yeah, you said it's really charged. It really is. There's been a lot of visceral anger, I'd say, in the country in the wake of the attack, really because of the cold-blooded nature of the attack. I talked about those details, that the men were shot at close range, Hindu men were singled out. So that has really struck a chord, especially with the religious connotation of the attack. We saw protests erupting right after the shooting, effigies burned, Pakistan flags burned, because many Indians in the country, are listening to their government and also hearing that New Delhi blames Pakistan, even though Pakistan has denied it. So a lot of Indians were really calling for their neighbor, Pakistan, which there's a lot of hatred towards Pakistan here, they were calling for Pakistan to be bombed as punishment, as vengeance, And what's interesting is, there was so much focus on the widows, the survivors of this. There was one photo in particular that I remember. It was a newlywed, and you saw her sitting like really sort of listlessly beside her husband's dead body. And that photo made the rounds. It really galvanized the sorrow and the anger in the country and became a bit of a signal.
I just want the entire nation to pray for him, that wherever he is, he's in good spirit, he's healthy, and he's at peace. That's the only thing that I want. There is one more thing that I want. I do not want any hatred towards anybody. This is what is happening. People going against Muslims or Kashmiris, we don't want this. We want peace and only peace.
And then we heard from the Prime Minister of India as well, Narendra Modi, and he had so many harsh words condemning the attack. He spoke in English at a rally, which is really unusual for Modi. He usually speaks in Hindi, but he really wanted the message that he was giving to be heard far and wide. And basically he was saying,
India will identify, track, and punish every terrorist and their backers. We will pursue them to the ends of the earth.
and so that rhetoric, I would say, really reached a fever pitch in the newspapers as well, right? Not surprisingly. So,
Right.
and we see that continuing to now, right? The morning after the missile strikes that you mentioned.
Just after midnight, Pakistan's peace shattered, a wave of Indian missiles lighting up the sky and rocking the nation. India says it was preempting planned terror attacks, but has provided no evidence of that claim. Among the more than 24 killed in Tuesday night's air raid were children. Mosques were damaged, and angered Pakistan has already vowed to respond.
Of course, the headlines were consistent on that one too, right? There was one that said justice, one said valor, one said payback. Another wrote that India has avenged spilt blood. And there's even large billboards up here in Mumbai congratulating Narendra Modi on the military operation. There's one that's giant and it shows him in army fatigues and dark sunglasses. There's another where he's dressed as a fighter pilot. So really a lot of focus on this attack and on the military strikes that followed.
Yeah. I understand that the Indian military response, the operation is being called Operation Sindoor. And just like, what does that mean? What's the symbolism behind that?
Yeah, it's really symbolic, Jamie. Sindoor is vermilion powder. So it's the red powder that married Hindu women wear, and they put it in their hair parts or on their foreheads. It's a sign that you're, married, and it's wiped off when they're widowed. So it's such a strong symbol here in India of the pain caused by the militant attack. And so in that billboard I was mentioning, that the red powder is there as where Sindoor is on that billboard. It's also a very Hindu symbol. So calling this Operation Sindoor can be also seen as a signal from Modi's Hindu nationalist government to his base, that he heard their calls for justice, their anger at this attack.
So in the midst of these escalating tensions after the militant attack, India decided to suspend the Indus Waters Treaty, which, as I understand it, allowed water from India to flow to Pakistan.
Any attempt to stop or divert the flow of water belonging to Pakistan, as per the Indus Water Treaty, will be considered as an act of war.
And what kind of impact could this have? I understand it's quite significant.
It's definitely a big deal. So the treaty divides rivers, the Indus and its tributaries, and really regulates how river water is shared between the two countries, who are, so close geographically connected, and yet so far ideologically. So Pakistan downstream desperately needs the water from 3 western rivers that India controls the flow of. And Pakistan needs that for about 80% of its agricultural output, a third of its hydropower. So it's a big deal to them. Pausing the treaty, basically it's been put in abeyance That's what India has done. So that's caused a lot of fear in Pakistan, especially after Modi commented just a few days ago, essentially saying that India's water used to go outside, it used to leave India, but it will now flow for India. So those comments kind of triggered even kind of more panic in Pakistan as well. So the move is a big escalation. Basically, this is an important treaty. It's not been touched even during the 3 previous wars that India and Pakistan have fought. So when you're suspending it, like, what does that mean? Symbolically, it's huge. But practically, you said, what kind of impact could it have? Practically, India doesn't currently have the infrastructure to divert the rivers, nor does it have the capacity to store massive amounts of water just to deprive Pakistan downstream. So they can't really do anything with it yet. But even just suspending it is, a punishing tactic. It's just not concrete yet.
Right. And then in turn, Pakistan threatened to pull out of the Shimla Agreement, a peace accord that was signed in 1972 after the creation of Bangladesh. And why is that important for us to know?
Yeah, so again, it's a big symbolic threat. The Shimla Agreement was signed back in the 70s, like you said, after the war that India and Pakistan have fought. It basically freezes the line of control. So that's the contentious and heavily fortified border between Pakistan and India, basically dividing Indian-controlled Kashmir from Pakistan-controlled Kashmir. So it freezes that line of control. The agreement basically ensures that no side can change the line unilaterally. So threatening to get rid of it just ramps everything up a whole other few notches and creates a whole other set of problems, especially with what we're seeing now. We're seeing gunfire and artillery exchanged along the line of control, so that, if that line becomes blurry and moves, then there's the potential for a lot more violence along that line. Already, India says 16 people living along the de facto border have been killed in that heavy exchange of gunfire after the military strikes. So it's a big potential for violence.
I know you've talked a little bit about some of it, and we mentioned some in the intro, but just tell me a little bit more about what we've seen this week in terms of escalating violence. You and I are talking just before 9 p.m. your time in Mumbai on Thursday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the military actions, it's important to say that it's already more aggressive than what we've seen in previous times when tensions have flared up between India and Pakistan. We saw an escalation in 2019. We saw one in 2016. This is already more than what we saw those 2 previous times. So it's a major escalation. And, when India hit Pakistan with those missile strikes targeting those 9 locations, Delhi claimed that those were what they call terrorist training camps. But Pakistan says the strikes killed more than 24 people, including children. India keeps stressing that the military operation was
measured, non-escalatory, proportionate, and responsible. They focused on dismantling the terrorist infrastructure and disabling terrorists likely to be sent across to India.
And then you hear Pakistan calling it a cowardly act of war, and they're promising that they'll strike back with corresponding action, with whatever is needed to match India's strikes.
Pakistan reserves the right and will respond to this aggression at a time, place, and means of our own choice.
And since then, you mentioned this as well, the tensions have stayed high, right? We've had heavy exchanges of gunfire overnight, last night, along the contested border. India hit Pakistan's air defenses today, and Pakistan is claiming that it shot down numerous drones. Number is like 25. They also, during the initial strikes overnight and Wednesday, Pakistan said they shot down several Indian fighter jets, which claim that Delhi refused to confirm. So there's all of this back and forth. There's heavy exchanges of gunfire and the potential for more along the line of control, and the very real possibility that Pakistan will feel the need to retaliate further, to respond.
Selima, we've got this horrible militant attack that India blames on Pakistan and Pakistan denies. We now have these violent eruptions that are worse than the violent eruptions that we've seen in 2016, 2019, right? And I just wonder if what we could do now is take a step back to better understand the tensions surrounding the contested region of Kashmir here, which is at the center of this. So India and Pakistan have fought multiple wars over it. Whenever there is violence between them, Kashmir is usually at the center of it, right? And so why does it continue to be a powder keg between these two countries?
Well, yeah, each country lays claim to Kashmir. They both want it, and each of them considers the region in the Himalayas as an essential part of their identity. I think that's what's important here. They both think it's extremely essential to their country, but each only controls parts of it. And also important to say that China administers a section as well to the east, a much smaller section of Kashmir. But basically, this has been a division, a rift, and a longstanding tension that goes all the way back to partition in 1947, when British India was split and the former colonial power was split along religious lines. Then became India, which was secular and predominantly Hindu, and Pakistan, which formed an Islamic republic. And Kashmir's population is majority Muslim, but its Maharaja at the time of partition chose to join India. And so this is where all of this tension stems from. It's really created so much animosity, and that animosity has endured for decades. It's been nearly 80 years that these two countries have been fighting over Kashmir. And it's really strategic region, right? It's strategic, it's beautiful, it's rich in resources, and it's sandwiched between all of these regional powers. So it's a real flashpoint. Indian-controlled Kashmir has seen armed insurgency basically resisting Delhi's rule for decades, ever since 1989, and tens of thousands of people have died in those ensuing decades. And India accuses Pakistan of fostering that unrest and backing militants, again, a claim that Islamabad denies, and that's basically the root of this flaring up of the conflict once again, is that blame going back and forth.
I also know that there's like a budding independence movement on the ground. Home to many that desire Kashmiris to have full independence. And what's the state of that movement today? How does that fit into the conversation that we're having?
Yeah, it's very much a fact there. There are many in Kashmir who are either resentful of India's rule, on the Indian-administered side, and some want to join Pakistan, but others wish for full independence. But that is really not something that would ever be entertained by either Pakistan or India. Really, each of them want Kashmir in full. There have been calls for a referendum way back when to be held in the region, but neither country would really like that, would really like to hear from what Kashmiris want.
We've talked about how this time is different in that the violence is more intense than what we saw in 2016 and 2019. In both cases, the fighting didn't spiral into an all-out war in those years. Is there anything else that makes this time different?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, the flare-ups are nothing new. Obviously, this one is different. Like we mentioned, it's really quite aggressive. But now things are a little bit different because of those previous skirmishes, I would say. There was always a sense that in 2019 that the Indian response of strikes on Pakistan was like a warning, basically. Look to what you're doing, is what India was trying to say. Take care of the terrorism that Delhi sees as being fostered in Pakistan. So that was sort of the impetus for 2019. And then it was like, okay, we're done, we can move on, and the tensions were dialed down. In this case, it sort of feels, I think, and there's a push from on the ground in India that didn't work. It didn't deter Pakistan, so perhaps we need to go bigger this time around. So that is one thing on the Indian side, I would say. Another is that what's different is that the world is different. I think there's a lot more war rhetoric thrown around. There's a lot more conflict thrown around. There's a lot of focus on both countries here on the need to respond, the need to retaliate. So I would say that is what's different here. The international community is obviously calling for a dial down, for de-escalation, but the world is also a little bit distracted.
Right. But these are still two nuclear powers. So I do imagine that much of the international community is deeply concerned about this, right?
Yeah, and we're seeing signs of that all around ever since the militant attack 2 weeks ago, right? The international community has been calling for calm and really speaking in a common, clear voice. We've heard the same message from the United States as we've heard from China, as we've heard from the United Kingdom, numerous other countries, the United Nations, everybody really calling for calm in this situation, pushing India and Pakistan to de-escalate the situation and to dial it back.
I want to see it stop. And if I can do anything to help, I will be there.
We are engaging urgently with both countries, as well as other international partners, encouraging dialogue, de-escalation, and the protection of civilians.
The EU recalls the need for a negotiated, mutually agreed, and lasting peaceful solution to the conflict.
Because there is very much, like you said, an awareness that this is a volatile situation. It's unpredictable, and each side could easily be drawn into escalation when you look at that need that each side sometimes feels to retaliate. We talked about what's different as well. The United States' role in this is quite different. So I think when people look around at the international community, there's a question as to who could help both India and Pakistan dial it down and dial down the tensions. There's not sort of a natural leader as much as there used to be in 2019. The United States is no longer the same type of player as they were on the world stage. Multilateralism is a lot weaker than it used to be. But also, the U.S. is a lot more closer to India than it was even 5 years ago when the previous strikes happened, right? At the time, the United States was still quite friendly with Pakistan, obviously because of the situation in Afghanistan, a neighboring country. So the role of the United States has shifted. That is a country that would have naturally been somebody that the world would look to sort of play an arbitration role in all of this and to speak to both sides. We are seeing them doing that. You know, we heard from Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that he spoke to both parties and that we're calling for calm. We heard Donald Trump talk about it as well. But is there a strong international voice to sort of help this situation become a little bit more calm? I think that's a question that a lot of people are asking right now.
Yeah, really concerning stuff, especially considering, how quickly this could spiral out of control. Selma, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, that is all for today. Front Burner was produced this week by Matthew Amha, Matt Muse, Ali James, Joytha Shengupta, Lauren Donnelly, and Mackenzie Cameron. Our video producer is Evan Agard, and our YouTube producer is John Lee. Our music is by Joseph Shabison. Our senior producer is Elaine Chow. Our executive producer is Nick McCabe-Locos, and I'm Jamie Poisson. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you on Monday.